Evil dies tonight. Welcome in to the Bro Squad podcast, where we are just a bunch of bros drinking beer and talking movies. This is our review of Halloween Kills. I'm your host, the Mayor Jeff Hornacek, joined by our legal counsel, Ronnie Cycli, here to review this as we do all of our movies on the 5 Bro 4 Squad criteria: the acting, the story, our favorite scene, the impact of the movie, and its rewatchability. And I think right off the top, spoilers coming. So if you have not seen Halloween Kills, it's on Peacock, it's in theaters. Go check it out before you watch this movie. And Cycli, I actually think it'd be a nice way to begin the review before we even get into the acting and the cast, just so people have a little bit of context. Coming into this movie, what is your relationship with the Halloween franchise? And then specifically, I guess, the installment that came out in 2018, sort of the soft sequel / reboot, just so people know coming in, all right, are we fans? Yeah. Are we trepidatiously looking forward to this? Open-minded? Where did you sit before you saw this film?
So I have a very interesting relationship with the movie, or with the franchise, I should say, because I think the original Halloween is one of the most iconic and really sets the standard for what occurs in the horror genre for the next 30 years, literally. We've talked about it a couple of times on the pod that, like, there were horror movies. Obviously, we had Dracula and Psycho and all these kind of, what was considered horror back in the day. But Michael Myers and the Halloween franchise rewrote all of it. Obviously, it inspired Jason. It inspired Freddy Krueger, the slasher films that we got in the 80s, and then rebuilt up with Scream in the late 90s. So, the Halloween original movie, I think, is still not only holds up, but it's still iconic. It's still a fantastic film. I think I mentioned to you, I rewatched, Friday the 13th, and we both kind of felt the same way. Like, that movie doesn't hold up. Halloween does. Now, my issues with the franchise is how much they've just reworked the story. I mean,
and we'll get into that. I will at least.
we get Halloween 2, which I thought was pretty good sequel. Starts immediately after Halloween, comes up with the narrative that Laurie is adopted and she's related to Michael Myers, and and then we get Halloween 3, which is unrelated to Halloween 4, and so on and so forth. And they just rewrite it. They retcon everything. There's a new canon. We get Halloween 2.0 or
H2O.
H2O, that's what it was, yeah.
Because it's like water, get it?
Yeah, in 2000. But it was just the fact that they started also making it silly and stupid. They took away from the, like, Michael Myers was a real villain, and it's not even that debatable. I mean, you can have a debate, but if not the greatest horror movie villain. So, at least in terms of a slasher. So, I really like the franchise, and so I'll finish it off with saying I loved the new installment 2 years ago. I thought, or 3 years ago, I thought it returned to, while they did retcon the story and have ended Halloween 2 as canon, it was gritty, it was dark, and it returned to that feel. It didn't make fun of itself. It didn't get campy. So I love the films when it's as good as it can be, but as long as they're taking it seriously.
Yeah, we'll get into it. Impact, at least I will, in terms of, like, what this has done, like the seek boot, I guess, where it's like you take a sequel and any films that, like, you just weren't good, we just ignore them. And not only ignore them, but sometimes actively write them out of canon. I think life would be great if we could do that, but that's really not how things work. Like, they happened and they exist. And I know there's too many films now to really, like, right this ship. But having said all that, I do think these new installments directed by David Gordon Green have been quite the shot in the arm for me in the horror genre. And
good for Danny McBride. Can I just say that? It's so funny to me that he's a writer on these.
Yeah. He said that he had an idea and he pitched to the studio and they were like, this isn't funny. And he's like, no, it's not. I actually have been thinking about this for a long time.
Originally I was nervous about that, but yeah.
Yeah, he pulled it off. I hope he writes more horror after this. Acting and cast, positive, negative. Who stood out in the second one for you?
I'm very negative on this side of the film. I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was paced really well for an hour, 45 minutes. But and usually in the horror franchise and the genre itself, acting did not carry this movie for me. Just in general, I thought, I love Jamie Lee Curtis, but she was very much sidelined in this movie, and on purpose. We know there's a trilogy. We know we're getting one more movie this year. We can have the showdown, but with her being sidelined and focused on the rest of the cast, I thought that's kind of where a lot of weaknesses showed. I thought Judy Greer was actually very weak in this film. I do not think I think she's fine in specific roles, but this is a little too much for her. I do like that we did get we talked about this off pod, but Kyle Richards, who she was the original kid in the 1978 film. It was cool that they brought some of the kids back. It was nice, but I just who played Tommy,
Anthony Michael Hall.
Anthony Michael Hall. I thought he was really over the top.
Yes.
I just didn't feel like the acting and cast. While I like the callbacks, that's not what made this movie. Whereas I thought the movie 3 years ago was actually really strong in the acting. So it was a little distracting for me. That's what happens when you sideline your main character.
I actually totally agree with you. I think the 2018 Halloween, Jamie Lee Curtis delivered a completely rejuvenated performance as Laurie Strode. Like, she acclimated back into the role, and they had a really, I think, interesting nuance added to her character and how she was coping with her trauma being attacked by Michael. Two things I'll say about this film. Number one, I thought there was kind of some interesting, and by the way, I really like this movie. So if people at home are thinking like, oh, Hornacek's just going to shit on this thing because he didn't like the acting, no, I really enjoyed this. But some weird stunt casting. So two comedians in Lenny Clark and Michael McDonald. Michael McDonald is like Stewart from Mad TV. And
right? Yes. Okay. I'm glad you brought this up.
So it's like hard for me to put them in a role like this. It just
they were
takes
funny.
Yeah, oddly. Yes, and Lenny Clark, who, I mean, he's like the Boston comedian who, in the beginning of the movie, Michael like breaks into his house and kills him. I mean, he's from like Fever Pitch and a bunch of other things. That's what I recognize him from. So it's just weird to see them in such a serious and dark movie, although they both get gruesomely murdered. So that's, I guess, a little bit interesting. But I agree with you. I think Judy Greer was horrible in this. I view her as a very strong comedic actor. And I don't know if she was just out of her element or punching above her weight, but I thought she was really bad. And Jamie Lee Curtis, specifically her scene in the hospital, like the one time that they actually needed her to step up and do something for the narrative, I just felt nothing. I don't know if she was like, I don't know if she was directed weird or what, but that scene was cringeworthy to me.
I just think it's the fact that they decided to make a trilogy when they really had a two-parter. And they just had to sit here and be like, we're going to extend this and force a role on her or force a choice for her character. That just, I don't know. It didn't follow through. I thought Will Patton was good too. I mean, he's fine. He didn't, that was okay. That was at its best. Was the acting was okay.
Yeah. Although I will say someone who I think is a rising star is Andy Matichak, who played Allison, the granddaughter.
Yeah, she did good.
She's really good, and I'm excited to see her in some other stuff going forward. I think she has incredible talent.
She was probably the best one.
Yeah, I think so too. She crushed it. I thought she was awesome. All right, on to the story and the plot. So I guess a few things that I wrote down, because I think the plot synopsis, they're just like Michael Myers creeps through Hadonfield, Illinois. Like, yeah, we know.
We know.
Some variation of that. And the things I wrote down was this definitively retcons Halloween 2. There was one line made towards it in the first Halloween, the one that came out 3 years ago, but this definitively does.
Right. It was I remember, I'm pretty sure we talked about it 3 years ago. Is it going to rewrite it? And then we got our answer pretty quick.
Yeah. Laurie is sidelined, essentially. And then the thing that I thought that was really interesting about this, and not to throw too much at you to talk about right off the top cyclically, but what they did with the townspeople of Hadonfield in this, to me, felt, number one, very relevant to where we're at right now in the world. And number two, something very unique to this franchise. Like, we've never really seen the mob mentality and like wanting to fight back against Michael, or at least like find something to use as a manifestation of Michael, or like a placeholder for him to take out their anger and frustration. And I actually thought that was just the idea of that, to me, was very, very interesting. But what did you think of the story?
Yeah, I think they had to do something. I mean, again, I kind of already mentioned they decided to make this a trilogy. Okay, well, what are you going to do? everyone knows the hardest part of a trilogy is that middle film, and it can make or break the trilogy. When you talk about iconic middle films, you're talking about Empire Strikes Back and Two Towers. But if you don't have a good solid middle, I think you can lose it pretty quick. I think the movie suffered a little bit because they just chose to make it 3 because they could. They had to do something. And I think the something they did helped it a ton. I didn't enjoy this movie as much as you did, but I didn't hate the movie. I actually very much enjoyed my viewing experience. And the parts that made me like the film the most was what they did differently, and that was the mob mentality. We've seen in the Halloween franchise in Hadonfield that he's always been the boogeyman. He's always been like, is he actually real? Like, it's kind of a story kids tell to each other. This was real, right? Like the whole town was united on this. So it was no longer like, ooh, Michael Myers. It was like, fuck this guy. Like, he keeps terrorizing us. Like, even in the last film 3 years ago, like, Laurie's daughter was like, oh my gosh, get over it. It's done. Like, there was no definitive. This was definitive. Like, Michael Myers is a terror to our town. And so it was good to see that change. The story itself, though, to me, it just didn't progress anywhere, right?
Yeah, there's really not much story, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it retcons Halloween 2, but it mimics Halloween 2 in a lot of ways.
Very true.
It started immediately after the last one, right? Like it does have that certain feel, except Michael Myers does not go to the hospital. He does not do what you expect. The whole time, to be honest with you, about 15 minutes left in the film, I'm almost like, when are we getting him in the hospital? And then you realize he's not going there at all.
Like, Michael and Laurie are never together in this movie.
No, at all. And so,
right?
No, I don't think. I mean, outside of the first scene, which, oh my God, talk about that first scene when he just kills all the firemen. But we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, the story itself, to me, I don't know. It kind of goes with the cast. It was okay at best. I just genuinely think this should have been a 2-parter, and they stretched it.
Yeah, without having seen Halloween Ends, which I'm very excited for, it's hard to say if this film was necessary, because right now, narratively, it doesn't feel necessary. I really enjoyed it. I thought there was some interesting ideas, but does it really get us, like, do we need this to get from the beginning to the end of this trilogy that you've talked about? So that was my other question, is, was it just too much setup? And probably it was, because when I think about it too, really, where do we end outside of, and again, we're spoiling it, like, outside of Laurie's daughter, Karen, dying? Like, where do we really end that's different from the original Halloween? Like, if Michael just escaped the house at the end, we could have pretty much started the third one, right? He kills a few more people in Hadonfield, and that's pretty much it. I'm trying to think if I missed anything.
No, that's it. And he just goes back into his house. Is he just going to be hanging out there, I guess, waiting for Laurie? Or he's just like, guys, I just want to go home. Leave me alone. Yeah.
And we'll get at the very end, or I guess an impact into what you think they'll do with the third Halloween, because I think you have some interesting ideas there. But story-wise, again, you don't watch Halloween for the story and the plot, but especially I feel like the way the trailer was set up, I thought there was going to be something kind of crazy in this movie.
I thought there was more. I really, and that's why, you and I talked about it. I think I was a little let down because I genuinely did enjoy the viewing experience, but I was let down because I thought there was going to be something. I thought there was going to be some bang at the end, and there just wasn't. It was it's Michael Myers just killing a bunch of people, which is fine, man. Like, I get it. That's what I signed up for, but I don't know. I expected more.
Also, and maybe this is just me misremembering, wasn't there something in the trailer that showed, or at least was edited, to where it seemed like Laurie was screaming at Michael? Like a scene where they were together that we never saw?
I recall that.
So I don't know if that's from Halloween Ends, or if it was something they just took out of this movie.
They were filmed together. Am I incorrect in this?
No, they were, yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know. But I was like kind of waiting for that to happen the whole time. It never did.
And I think that was part of it. They built it up. I was waiting for that. Honestly, with so little left in the film, it kind of hit me. I'm like, okay, this is just set up.
All right, on to best scene, and I got to tell you, Cycly, the kill count in this movie was incredible. That you could take one of like 4, and I would be so happy taking any of the others, because I actually do think, like you said, pacing was definitely a strong suit of this thing. because if you set your drink down for a second or went to go pee without pausing it, you were going to miss Michael brutally murdering someone in very creative fashion, and you don't want to do that. So what's your favorite scene?
But before I get to that, have you looked up the official kill count? Because I wish I had. I mean,
I have not.
30 minutes into the film, my wife and I are like, he has killed like 80 people. Like, this is insane.
Yeah, I mean, especially once you hit that mob scene, he probably hit close to triple digits, right?
It might be the most. I don't know. It was, and I got to tell you, at one point we're watching the film, we pause it because we're watching it on Peacock and because we're cheap, and I go to get another drink and I pause the film, and all of a sudden it says an hour. Like, we were an hour into the film. There's 45 minutes left, and we were like, what the hell? I thought I've been watching for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So the film was amazingly, like, just smooth. I will compliment it.
And I got to say, Michael's kind of self-aware where, like, when he went to that couple's house, for example, you could tell he was like, well, I have so many tools at my disposal to kill these people. Let's not do something I've done before.
Because usually he's not a creative killer. Like, he's always theatrical after the death. He always likes setting it up. Yeah.
He's like Army football in like the early 1900s. It's just
coach's kid.
Power option. Yeah.
Yeah. Route runner.
Yeah.
So my favorite scene, I mean, you and I talked about this. It's what did set this film apart compared to the other movies. It was the mob scene at the hospital when they're all hunting the other mental patient who did escape at the same time that Michael Myers escaped. Yeah. I think it's completely relevant, not just in a horror franchise, but in everything. Actually, the funniest thing, I got on Reddit after watching this film, and if you're a Redditor like me, everyone remembers the Boston bomber, 10 years ago, and Reddit got kind of famous for this because, in a really bad way, because they got in on the hunt. They were detectives and fighting the Boston bombers, and of course, as happens on the internet, they find the wrong guy, and Reddit ruins his poor family, and everything that happened. I don't want to mention it because it was pretty tragic. But it's just very real, especially in an internet age where the mob mentality is just so powerful and it's scary. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Even with Lori or Judy saying that is not the same person. I mean, you and I laughed about this. It was an old hunchbacked man. Like, there's no way that's Michael Myers. No. But to me, it was different. It was very real. It was authentic, and it was sad.
Because they want it to be him so badly, they will overlook every other possible attribute or part of the scenario that says otherwise.
And Tommy's like fake apology because he's like, I didn't know. Like, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to do good. Like, I don't care what your intentions are in this scenario. You better be right. Like, there's a reason we have a justice system in this country is to protect from this and vigilantes. And it to me, it was like, it just hit hard. It was hit accurately. And it was the best, not just the best scene. It was the best thing, in my opinion, that this film did.
And if I can be honest, the whole evil dies tonight, we kind of made fun of it off the top.
Yeah.
When they first started that in the movie, and that was a big part of the marketing, this is not at all where I saw it going. I thought it was just simply going to be like, because kind of Laurie's whole story, and I think specifically through this new trilogy, is the victim becomes empowered, and like you sort of take control of your situation. And I thought that's just really what was happening to the people of Hadonfield. So that was really interesting to me to see the take that David Gordon Green and Danny McBride took, was that, the people of Hadonfield are empowered, but it's incredibly misguided. Like, they're empowered, but it's not victimless at all. Like,
but it's so human. That's so human for all of us. If we don't hone it in, we just want to get so anxious about doing what's right, but and then you make it worse.
Yes, totally agree. Man, I have so many here that I just need to narrow in on. So I have one murder scene, and then one that I just thought was really interesting, and the one time that the movie actually kind of took a breath, but I really enjoyed it. So I'll start with that scene first. I actually really enjoyed the scene where probably the end of the first act, where we're at the bar for the talent show on Halloween night, and we're just kind of meeting all the characters, and it's Anthony Michael Hall's character goes up and gives sort of the speech about Michael Myers. But
Sorry, I have to interrupt you really fast. One of my favorite comments I saw online was like, someone needs to tell the Tommy kid what a talent show is. Like,
for real,
that's not a talent. Like,
it's not like let me tell a story about something that happened to me once. Like, there's not even a punchline, and in fact, there's the opposite of punchline. Everyone's uncomfortable.
Yeah, like.
But I just thought that was a cool scene to sort of meet the people of Haddonfield connected to this. And just to kind of get to spend more time in the, because in a weird way, the more that we've had entries in the Halloween franchise, I'm interested in Haddonfield as a place when people aren't being brutally murdered. And this is like one of the rare times we actually get to do that, explore
It's the same thing we've said in horror, in superhero franchises. We're like, what is it like living there? The taxes alone.
to pay for this infrastructure rebuild. So that was cool, and just sort of the way that it I think it did a really good job of like very methodically building to the evil dies tonight thing, like showing the camaraderie between the people in Haddonfield, and then also how like sort of like the Jedi always preaches, although we know they're wrong about a million things, but how fear leads to this uncontrollable anger, right? Like they're so scared of Michael Myers that their way of you know putting some makeup over that to make it not look visible is they overcompensate with this irrational like anger or way of claiming they're fixing things.
He's so confident he could take him on with a baseball bat.
Yeah, that was,
you know, in that I'm like, dude, come on.
Michael's like even laughing. I'm like, bro, for real? Woman just stabbed me in the back with a pitchfork and I didn't flinch.
It was weird that was his one line in the film.
It's he doesn't normally talk, and for him to say bruh right off the bat, you're like, bruh. I would say it's out of character, but Michael, I actually don't think I know you that well.
No.
But then my favorite action scene was the attack in the park where the kids were on the swings. Michael shows up, just some really creative kills. And I just love when Michael climbs on top of a car. It's like, because I just picture someone like across the street seeing him on top of the car, and it's not as scary as when you're in the car, but it probably definitely looks weird. What's he doing?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that, like, if you're on the sideline, you're like, really?
Yeah. But that was just a cool one where, and they mixed in some humor in it in the right way too, like the chick falling out and then trying to come back and actually shooting herself.
The way she got shot, oh god, that was hilarious. I wish Michael had it for a bit, like, what if he like cracked a smile after she dies like that? He's like, damn, I'm good.
He's like, oh, classic.
Classic.
All right,
me.
I'm interested to see what you say here, Cycly. So our second to last category is the impact of the film, which can really be anything from what you think is going to happen in the franchise going forward, or how you feel about this film on the whole, thoughts on the franchise plans, like any sort of impact this movie had on you or impact you think it will have.
I think the impact's going to be tough for this one because this, again, I mentioned this multiple times. This was a second parter in a trilogy that didn't really do much. It didn't put us in a situation where that we need this part of the story needed to be told. I think we'll know more in a year. I'm glad we only have to wait a year for the end of this. But I have a feeling that I could probably just watch the Halloween and then Halloween Ends.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily know that there's an impact outside of any impact that any of these movies have had between the original and the reboot here 3 years ago. Like, does Halloween H2O or really have an impact? I mean, it's just I hope that the franchise ends with a bang. I think, I have a theory, and we'll talk about that obviously Michael's going to die at the end of this. I say that obviously. I'm sure they'll leave it. But it's also to the point to that, like, it's Hollywood now. Even if he does die, they'll just restart it again.
Yeah.
So I think they'll have no problem killing him and then just doing something else. Like, you had to get Jamie Lee Curtis on board for a reason. I just think the impact of this one, it's going to be forgotten. If they do kill him at the end of this, it will be this movie. It'll be Halloween Ends that's remembered. I just don't see how this movie, other than just someone wanting to watch them in the order they came out, really is going to stand on its own. So, we'll talk about what we think the franchise is going, but the impact of this one, I think it's a fun Halloween film that we watched in October, and obviously it did great numbers, but it didn't give what people were going to what people signed up for. I think we're going to wait one more year for that.
Before I ask you for your theory on how this will end, because you told me off pod and I really liked it, let me ask this. What is your take on, to my knowledge, there hasn't been a term coined for this, like the retconned soft reboot sequel, like the Ret boot, I guess, where it's like, this is a sequel to the original Halloween. Now, obviously, there have been, I think, 6, or if you don't count the Rob Zombies, 5 entries after that Halloween. I guess 4 if you exclude Season of the Witch that are supposed.
I was going to say, yeah, that one is just.
Yeah, that are supposed to be canon, that are just completely not like ignored, basically. And while I think these are like the ones that David Gordon Green has directed are better than probably all of those. Like, what are your thoughts on movies doing this, especially like later on in a franchise, just saying like, yeah, but those sucked, so they didn't happen really?
I think it's just the part of the world that we have to accept now. I think Hollywood isn't so. I mean, we've talked about this with the Spider-Man movies or James Bond movies, or we're just at a place to where
DC.
They can just DC, yeah, everything. I mean, we're getting a Batman in March. I mean, I'm so excited for it. We're just getting another one, and we just accept it. We'll eat it up. It's okay. Like Casino Royale for James Bond. That movie had already been written, but we restarted it for Daniel Craig's James Bond. But how good was it? It was amazing. It's arguably the best Bond ever. And so I don't think I'm against it necessarily on the surface, as long as you do it with intent. To retcon or to remove canon to just make it convenient for you, whether it's Halloween or any of these franchises, that's where the problem is. Show me an original story, fine. Like, even if they killed Michael Myers, that's not the end. We know how Hollywood is. They'll just bring him back. Then fine, but just do it in an original way. Like, we're all gonna miss Michael Myers. We don't want him to go away forever. That's fine. And so I think I'm okay with it as long as, what Christopher Nolan did with Batman, what the Daniel Craig movies, I already referenced that. I'm just saying, if you're going to do it with care and love of the characters that were created for a specific purpose. Don't take these characters that people hold dear in their heart and then just shit on something they loved, right? Like, give them that.
Yeah, I think I pretty much completely agree with that, because the way I look at it, I hate the idea of it, but also just make a quality film. And if this is a necessary part of that, then I'm like, am I wanting to die on the hill of Halloween Resurrection, like taking that out of the canon? No, that's fucking stupid. I think it's a little bit ridiculous that we do act like all the bad movies didn't happen, but also every example I can think of off the top of my head, I have loved the movie that needed to do it, like the Casino Royale and Daniel Craig James Bonds. These Halloween movies, to a lesser extent, the new Suicide Squad film, Christopher Nolan's Batmans. Like, I love those movies so much that if this is a part of the package or the bill of goods that I have to buy, then yeah, okay, I'm fine with it. But I don't want it to become such a habit where it's like any sequel we make, like you said, with a character, we just disregard some of the canon. But I also don't want to be the guy that, like, I'm not going to sit here and defend Halloween 5. Like, I don't think that's a battle that I want to fight just because I'm upset that they're removing its canon. And maybe some people are, but
I do believe in the Deus Machina, right? Like, you are the god, you are the storyteller. That is the power of movies and books, and why we even have a podcast and why we love. You are in charge to take these stories. I will give you that benefit of the doubt. Just treat me with respect if you're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said. All right, last thing before rewatchability. What, if you're comfortable sharing it, even though there, people out there might be like, I thought of that first, like, whatever. What is your theory on how Halloween ends? Will, let's say conclude the trilogy, because as far as we know, there are no plans thus far to continue it after that. Although, like you said, money talks. It's Hollywood, so.
It's like the Austin Powers. How will Halloween end? Like, allow myself to introduce
myself. My father's whereabouts.
I don't think this is. I think this is probably an obvious theory. I have mentioned it before. I'm a big Harry Potter fan, as many of you know, and there's a prophecy in Harry Potter that one can't live without the other, meaning that Voldemort and Harry can't continue to live on this earth. They kind of cancel each other out, like they have to die together. And obviously that happened, but Harry was a Horcrux, and so there was a little bit of an asterisk there. I think that's what we're getting here, right? Like Jamie Lee Curtis signed up to do these movies for a reason, kind of like Daniel Craig signed up to do the last James Bond for a reason. And when you see the films, you're like, that makes sense. I feel like they're leading into a situation to where he's been around the whole time she has, and it's basically they've been mirroring each other. She has to die. She absolutely has to die. And I think at that point, that's when Michael can and will die. I don't see there's not a happy ending here. And if you want a happy ending, you're not watching the right franchise.
Right. You're in the wrong
killed
spot.
60 people. Right. If Laurie kills him, is it really happy she just lost her daughter? I mean, like, her whole life has been about Michael Myers. So I think they die together. Halloween ends. Halloween exists with Laurie. Halloween exists with Michael Myers. You don't have one without the other. And I'm sure like a billion people have this theory. So maybe they'll do something different because maybe it's too obvious. But if they don't do that, they can be creative in the way they do it. But if they don't do that, then they end it with him breathing again. It's like, all right, man, what am I signing up for?
I don't think they will. I feel like they have a respect for the franchise in the sense that like they're fans who have been existing in Hollywood, and David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, and so for them to write this, I feel like they had a unique take on it. We've already seen some of that, so I think you're right in line with what's going to happen, to be honest.
She has to die, and he has to die in this story.
It's kind of crazy that they haven't gone to the well of killing Laurie yet in this franchise. I say yet because there's been so many installments, and Jamie Lee Curtis has been involved so much. To me, that's like your trump card. That's like your ace in the hole, and I'm surprised that they have killed her.
It's just like, was Halloween 4 where she was basically dead, but kind of like the Michael Myers, and then they retcon the story. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely.
Yeah, because I know she's in H2O if that came out after that, because.
Yeah, she is, but that's where they started like bringing her back for the sake of bringing her back. I felt like. Yeah, I could be wrong. I could absolutely be wrong. I thought they implied they killed her in like the 80s.
Well, and again, I've been wrong on a million predictions in my life, especially on this podcast. But based on Jamie Lee Curtis's age and, like you said, her agreeing to come back for this specific trilogy, I feel like if she dies in the next one, Halloween Ends, that will probably be from her as Laurie Strode. But yeah, I could be wrong. All right, last thing, and then anything we left out that you want to talk about, but re-watchability for this movie. I got to say, I think this would be a good commentary for us just because the kill count is so high. But after the third one comes out, which I'm assuming is next year and Halloween Ends, I do think I will want to go back and rewatch all three of these almost as if it's one movie. But often the problem with the second film in a trilogy, I think Empire is the exception, but normally it is sort of a bridge between the first and third. So I don't think specifically this one I'll go back and rewatch too much, even though I did enjoy it. But there are some really fun kills in this, and it's paced incredibly well. What do you think?
It's like the John Wick for Michael Myers.
There you go.
By the way, I did confirm in Halloween 4, Laurie was revealed to have died in a car accident before.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Film. But then they retconned it by saying, "Oh, we tricked. It was a
trick." Because H2O, it shows that she's in witness protection. They faked the car accident.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with you in rewatchability. I think I'll probably rewatch it next year at this exact time. But I don't see myself necessarily like going back to the original Halloween movie the way I would for Halloween Kills. I think it doesn't really exist on its own unless you really are just one of those people. And you and I are, so I feel like you and I are more likely than an average person to rewatch this. But for the most part, we would be doing it because we're doing a marathon.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see a reason why I'd be like, you know what? I want to watch Halloween Kills tonight.
But that actually would be kind of cool, though, next year, whenever this is released, like in theaters, you and I should get together, watch the first two, get hammered drunk, and then go to the theater to watch the third one.
I'm so in. Yeah. Honestly, I'm down to watch, start with 78.
Ooh, yeah, that would be cool. And then tally the kills. Let's set an over-under at like 150 and see if he gets it.
Michael Myers is a legend.
He's the GOAT. I mean, we all know it.
He's never, okay, confirm. He's never spoken outside of the Rob Zombie one, right? Like, didn't he say something in the Rob Zombie one?
That's a good question. If he did, it was probably only as a child in that one.
Yeah. What if his last words were like, Laurie, I love you?
Do you think he'll talk in the third one?
I doubt it, but it would be a pretty cool ending for him and Laurie to have a moment.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what they could even do. I feel like there's a lot they could do, but also not much, if that makes sense.
It would have to be something so just like insane. Like it would only be like 3 words, and it would be like the Jay and Silent Bob always had something to say in those movies, but it was like one sentence, but every time it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Like Michael Myers would have to be like,
he's like a
I
quantum
am your father.
physicist.
Like, wait,
yeah.
but you're not.
I mean, whatever he says, if it's brief, which I'm assuming it will be, it will probably become iconic. Exactly. Like Michael Myers, one time he speaks.
What if he's like, hey, sorry about that. I've actually been trying to catch up to you for a while.
You dropped your wallet in 78, trying to bring it back.
I have literally killed everyone to get to you.
People have been assholes to me. All right. Before we let the people go, anything else, Cycling? Anything we left out?
No, I think it's a fun film. I will say, like, I didn't enjoy it thoroughly, but I mean, the whole time I was watching, I was entertained. And that's what you want at the end of the movie. Like, this wasn't going to wow me. This wasn't going to win an Oscar. It's not the greatest horror movie ever. But it has entertaining kills, and it is Michael Myers. And it's not the worst in the franchise by far. I think we're holding to a standard of the reboot. So gotta love and respect Michael Myers.
Yeah, I think as far as like slasher films go, it's high quality to me for a slasher film. Not quite as good as the 2018 one, but yeah, I really don't have much negative to say about it. I think if you are interested enough to watch this movie, then you will probably have a really good time with it. Definitely not without its flaws, but it achieves what it sets out to do, I think.
And I think it's in like the 40 percentile of Rotten Tomatoes, and you and I actually talked about this last week, that horror films, that's actually really good. It's crazy to me that 3 years ago, this one was in the 70s, I think. So
we pretty much started this podcast because there's a huge gap in between critics and audiences.
Yeah.
And while I'm not going to sit here and act like this is a cinematic masterpiece, if you're a critic and I think films should be judged on what they're trying to do and if they entertain you. And to me, both of those boxes are checked with Halloween Kills. Like, where do you think it missed its like mark?
To me, it was the acting and the story. Like, other than that, it was fun.
It'd be like if I'm baking chocolate chip cookies and you eat them and say like, well, this doesn't taste like garlic bread at all. I'm like, I wasn't trying to make garlic bread. The fuck are you talking about?
Oh, I have to mention this really quick on the pod. I had to give my wife a hard time. She's not as much of she likes like realistic horror way more. And while Michael Myers is kind of semi-realistic, he's obviously not. And after his, because Michael Myers can get beat up and everything, she's like, this is ridiculous. I was like, okay, first I paused. I was like, you can't be watching this film and be like, why is Michael Myers surviving?
Serial killers.
Yeah, I was like, no. Like, you don't be one of those people watching this film. It's not for you.
I would have thoroughly enjoyed watching her.
I had to tell her, like, if we're going to make it to this movie, you can make comments, but not about Michael Myers surviving or shit.
In his defense, he at least, like, lays down for a little bit before he gets up and, like...
He's tired.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. He's got a nap sometime.
I like that he's balding in the movie. Like, once you have his mask off for like half a second, you notice he's bald.
Ooh, I guess last thing to say, do you think they will show his face in the last one?
I hope so. It's kind of like the Vader, right? But like, once we saw Vader's face, like, what did it really do for us?
Nothing.
Yeah. What's the best thing about The Strangers? We never saw their face.
Yeah, I agree.
They might, but it won't. I don't think it will give us any satisfaction other than being like, oh, we saw what he looked like. Yeah,
there's really nothing to gain because no matter what, people are going to be like, oh, that's it.
Yeah. What do you think they'll do it though?
I don't. I actually don't.
I think he's more likely to talk than
I could see that. Yeah, I agree. What if he has a British accent?
Hello, Laurie.
Hello, Laurie. What's up,
Hello,
bruv?
love.
If he calls her bruv.
I'd be in. That would be a Danny McBride ending. Like, he set this up on purpose.
He's like, I made 3 films just to get this one stupid fucking joke in at the end. I would actually...
Like, Danny, you fucking got us.
You are a god. We spent $200 million and waited 7 years just to get a bruv joke.
I'm in.
All right, for our legal counsel, Ronnie Cycli, I'm the mayor, Jeff Hornacek, and we are the Bro Force Squad podcast. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. Follow us on Twitter, @Bro Force Squad. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you find your podcasts. If you type in Bro Force Squad as 3 separate words. And check out our website, broforcesquad.com, where you can find everything we post and our squad blog. Until then, Cycli and I have to go to the Hadonfield bar and into that talent show. I think we're going to be Barbershop Quartet this year.
I think we are going to MC that talent show. You and I are good at that.
Should we come out of retirement for it?
I think it's time.
We're just on stage. Yep, it's us.
We're back, just like Michael Myers. Hey-oh.